Hello there, and welcome to the Dr. Lisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream, this amazingly wonderful radio station. If you are new to my show, thank you for joining me. I always talk about how much fun it is to do this show, and more importantly, how much it means to me when I hear that I've inspired somebody out there. You know, my tagline is igniting a renaissance of spirit, and hopefully in this hour, something ignites within you, especially with this amazing guest I have. If you're new to the show, let me tell you that the doctor is real. It's a PhD in Ed Psych. I have more academic degrees than any two people need. And I bring all of that together in this wonderful opportunity to explore and embrace other people's ideas and notions and share them with you. So thank you for joining me. Also, I want to remind you that this show is spiritually multilingual. So if I say something that you want to need to translate, right? If I say prayer and you want to say meditate, if I say God and you want to say universal energy, be my guest. Listen to the message. Go past the words. Don't get hung up there. I also want to remind you that one of my goals on this show is for each of us to be a philanthropist. And that can mean $5, it can mean $1 a month, whatever it is that you can afford. This year I am supporting the MS Society, and you can find those links. In fact, you can find me on all of my links, right? On my Facebook page, the Dr. Lisa Show. You can find me at elisarobin.com. You'll find the first chapter of my second novel, Dark Fire, there, my soul scopes, my blogs, and replays of this radio show. You can find me, you can find my book, and you can find my links to the MS fundraiser. So pick something and choose to be a philanthropist this year. Choose to live large, to give back, and to be compassionate. Okay, enough chatter. Hopefully everybody, you're ready and you've taken a deep breath. As you know, I bring on people who have inspired me, who've ignited something within me. And today is no different, and I can't believe I actually get to have this conversation. I'm going to talk with my guest, and hopefully engage you in so many ways with Tiffany Schlein. Now let me tell you how I found her. I came across, well, first off, let me tell you who she is. She's an author, a speaker, a filmmaker, an artist of ideas and notions. I came across her in a video, The Making of a Mensch, which is this amazing Yiddish word that means really good person. Usually about men, but hey, let's spread it around. Yiddish is sort of multi-generational, multi-gender. It's just this lovely language. Because of that, I went to her website and I watched more of her work. The Mensch is around the science of character. She has also a film on the doll Barbie and cultural connections. Then I came across Connected, which is her longer film on the way we connect as humans and with the planet and as species. And then I read her book, 24/6, which is supposedly about disconnecting for one day a week, having a Shabbat, a technology Shabbat. But it's about so much more than that. And after all of that, I reached out to her, and I can't believe it. Tiffany, welcome to my show, and thank you for joining me.
Oh, I loved hearing that whole journey on how you came to me. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, and I'm so glad that we're talking together today.
So can you talk to me about your journey? You have found a way, clearly, to ignite something in others and to inspire others. Can you just talk about your journey for a bit?
Yeah. Where should I start? I don't know. There's so many entry points to that.
Do you want to start with your book? And in fact, you want to tell people about your book and then start there?
Okay, I'll start there. I was going to go way back to my childhood, but yeah, that's much easier to start with.
we can go backwards and forwards. It's okay.
um, well, let's see. My background before I was a filmmaker, and the way I used to pay for my films was working in technology, which I also was really interested in. And kind of the early days of the web, I founded the Webby Awards, which honors the best of the web. And it's like the Oscars of the internet. It's in its 23rd year. I don't run it anymore, but I did for a decade. I was super interested in technology and still am. And I'm also very interested in what does technology amplify in us and what does it amputate, which is an idea from Marshall McLuhan. Like, how can we look at when technology makes things better and when it doesn't? And after a certain period of time, really after the iPhone came out, I was starting to feel extremely distracted all the time. And like I'm sure most people feel of their technology devices. But 11 years ago, I and my husband, who's a professor of robotics, so also very interested in technology and a critic of it too, like we love and are critical of it, we decided with our newborn baby and our 6-year-old daughter to turn off all screens one day a week for Friday night to Saturday night. We call our technology Shabbats. And it basically changed my life. It was the best thing I've ever done as a human, as a mother, as a wife, as a creative person. I just felt like I reconnected with myself in such a profound way each week, and I think we've forgotten what it feels like to be not on the devices and the notifications and connected to the whole world every second. Mm-hmm. And I felt this kind of rich inner life come back and a richer connection to my family and to nature, just so many things. Anyways, the longer we did it, I mean, we're on 11 years now doing it. We have a 17-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I've seen the way it's just benefited them so much. And again, we're like the other 6 days, we're like any other people, like using it for so many things, but to have a complete break one day a week has just been profound. And then the book really goes into the deeper ideas of Shabbat, which I love that you said you're kind of multilingual, because I grew up Jewish, I'm not religious. And one of my biggest issues with Judaism was the patriarchal nature of it. And I really wrestled with that. I'm like, there's no strong women here, there's a lot of angry men, and where do I fit in this story? And I do believe that stories propagate ideas, and the more you retell a story over and over, which is like the basis of Judaism, the more that's ensuring that power dynamic of men and women. Anyway, so I really struggled with what does it mean to be Jewish? What is it? But like, so now as an adult, to really get into the ideas of Judaism, not from the religious place, but the idea of Shabbat is, I think, one of the most profound ideas there is, and I think the best ideas from the Jews, from my people. And this concept of a complete day of rest, which is over 3,000 years old, and the only people I ever knew who did a full day of Shabbat were Orthodox Jews, so it felt very unavailable to me. It was for very religious Jews. And so by engaging in this practice in my family and kind of reinterpreting it, rethinking it, but keeping the essence of the idea, which is a day of rest, very pure. What does a day of rest mean in the 21st century? It was extremely exciting to me to take an idea, and actually the film that you met me on, The Making of a Mensch, was another idea. I'm really exploring Musar, which is like the Jewish ideas around character development, because I was making a lot of films about neuroscience and character development, and then stumbled upon Musar, which is the Jewish version, which I had never heard of. And again, it was really couched in religious terms, and I felt like I liberated it from just being for the religious to think about it as a body of ideas around character. So I think if you saw a thread in a lot of my work, like you said, I'm trying to take ideas and bring them to the highest level. Even with the web, the early days of the web, it was really only us geeks who were on the web in the early 90s. I know it's hard to imagine that now, but no one was using technology except like a very small section of geeks. And I was trying to say, oh my gosh, this idea is going to change the world. I want to translate it for the public. And I used to be on Good Morning America as their internet expert and telling people how the web was going to change their lives before anyone was using it. So, and what to look out for, the good and the bad. And that's always also a thread in my work, was the good, the bad, and the potential of anything. So the book 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week, came out last year before the pandemic. And, it was very exciting. It did very well before, and then the pandemic happened, and then everyone's like on screens even more. And it became more of a need to think about boundaries and how do I stay human? And of course, the internet has allowed us to connect in so many ways during the pandemic, but people need boundaries around that because it can just suck up your every waking moment and you're never by yourself. You're never thinking on your own. You're never present if you're on the screens all the time. So it's been exciting to, talk to a lot of people over Zoom during the pandemic about how to bring this practice into your life. And I look at it like yoga and meditation, that these are these incredible wisdom practices from other cultures that I bring into my life and make my life better. And I want the idea of Shabbat, I want it to feel available to anyone to bring it into their lives.
Thank you so much. There's so many pieces of that I want to sort of dig a bit deeper into. What I've learned reading your work and listening and watching your films is that, one, you connect across generations and across cultures, and you connect through story. And what I found, I think, moving for myself was how my story fit into yours in many different ways, and I'll talk about that as we go through our time together. Hopefully we'll have time for it. But I also was raised Jewish, though culturally Jewish, and didn't know about Musar, and didn't know, people sort of were not impressed with Shabbat, and then came to it later in my own life. And so your book was very moving for me because I'd been trying to do that. And then with the pandemic, trying to figure out how do I disconnect on Shabbat when it's the only way I can connect. And there was a lot of wisdom in there. What have you found has changed because of COVID? For example, if I wanted to go to Jewish services, I'd have to do Zoom, right? How has that changed?
Yeah. I find that my tech Shabbats are more needed now during COVID and the election, and all the stress of the news and the stress of the world was felt so much more intense this last year. So I just run towards Friday. But if you're living by yourself and that is the way you go to your services, what I would recommend, because I still think there's immense value in sitting with yourself, even if you're reading text about Shabbat. But let that couch both ends of your Shabbat experience. So Friday night, go to an online Zoom service if that's what you want to do, and let that be the last thing you do. Then spend a whole 24 hours not on technology, and then maybe the first thing you go back on is if you want to do a service. I mean, I'm not big on Shabbat services. My Shabbat for me is very much a meal with friends and family. It's kind of my house becomes my temple. Nature's my temple. Temple is never really, it's another whole thing, but you can hear there's a lot of resistance. Oh my gosh, my daughter just walked in and looks amazing. Hello, Bluma. I'm in an interview right now. Do you want to come say hi real quick?
Yes, we want to see her. Have her come say hi.
Come say hi. Come say hi. Just do a little peek. You do a little peek. That's Bluma.
Hello. Oh, thank you for joining us.
Okay, I love you. Okay. What was I saying? So,
as nature as your temple, go off on that track because I really kind of like that riff.
I guess I never. The places I feel the most spiritual are in nature and a redwood grove. I like the idea that one day a week we make our house sacred. That is a concept embedded in Shabbat as your home. It's actually called the Temple, Make a Palace in Time by Abraham Heschel, who's a famous Jewish philosopher, talks about that. You're making a palace in time and not in space. Like most people go to churches and temples to feel something, but what if you created that feeling in your own home? And we usually go out in nature on Shabbat. But what I was going to say, going back, because I am very sensitive to people that live by themselves. I watched a woman just crying on social media saying that she just can't bear to be alone anymore and she's going to go stay with her parents, and she's 35. And I just felt her pain so much because I do live with my family and I have a dog and a cat, and there's a lot of options to hug in my house, and I think that is the thing that is the hardest, is people don't have physical contact, and it's so essential. And eye contact, this is kind of this is not really eye contact because Zoom never provides eye contact. I freaking hate that about it. It should have a camera icon right in the middle of the screen.
Right in the middle, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But what I was going to say is that we need to value more being with ourselves. And the internet, all it does is provide distraction, entertainment, numbing, whatever to keep you from hearing what's inside. And that every great wisdom practice in Buddhism, Catholicism, Muslim, practices, there's so much about quieting the noise and going to silence. And there's a lot of different ways into that. But I guess, my Friday nights for Shabbat are very social. We usually have people over outside now, make a lovely meal. But Saturdays are much more quiet and inward, and I love that about them. And I think that everyone has a different situation with their living situation. Everyone's going to make it. And in the book, I talk about this a lot in 24/6. You're going to make this work for your situation. You either have kids or you don't. You're in a relationship or you're not. Your kids are teens or they're two. I mean, there's so many different issues you're going to deal with, but I try to write it in a way that I really give you entrance points in wherever you are. And a lot of my work, I'm always trying to go to the greatest common denominator. I'm speaking my truth, and I'm being very specific in my truth, because there's that saying, when you speak your truth, you will speak to the universal truth. So in a lot of my work, I start with a very personal, specific story that I then telegraph out to some bigger thing I've learned from that. And I love, and I know, I've made 30 films or more. And I remember there were some films where I tried to not start with me on camera talking to you with some story, and they don't work. I mean, some of them work, but I just find for my filmmaking style and my writing style, I'm going to tell you something, I'm going to share something with you, I'm going to open up to you. And hopefully that will open up to some larger truth that we can both share together.
Right. I have to say that what moves me about your film work is exactly that you start with a personal story, and that humans connect through stories. And then you take that story and you invite others to engage in it in different ways, and it moves out. And I think that is why your film work is so compelling. And actually your book too. Do you have a copy of your book? For people who are watching us, can you just show it, and let's make sure everyone knows where they can buy it, which I'm assuming everywhere online, right? Amazon and wherever people sell books, right?
I was so surprised you with that.
It's called 24.
Here's my book.
There's your book. Okay, it's called 24/6.
Okay, we have a new tagline with the publisher.
Okay.
Simon & Schuster's Gallery Books. They switched up the tagline, which I really like. It's a little longer. It's giving up screens one day a week to get more time, creativity, and connection.
Lovely.
But I was going to tell you something. Oh yeah, my daughter who just came in,
right?
Bluma. She was asking me recently. She was like, "Mom, would you ever direct a fiction story?" And one of my first films that I tried to make, it's the only film I didn't finish. It was called Zoli's Brain, and it took place entirely inside of someone's brain. It was like magic surrealism, and I didn't finish it, and it was like kind of a big failure early in my career to me, because I was way too young to make that film. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is that I kind of looked at her, and I don't have that interest, because I feel like what I've been able to tap into as an artist is speaking my truth as a great conduit to get to something else. I don't want to speak through other actors. I mean, to me, that's like, it's diluting my voice, what I'm trying to share with you. And there are plenty of films I love and directors that are amazing at that. But for me, I really realized that is part of my way to communicate ideas. And it was just an interesting thing because I knew she would love for me to direct a narrative film. And I was like, yeah, it's just not something that I'm interested in doing so many things, but that's not what I love about it.
Yeah, I can tell from your work but there's always that common theme of connection. One of your films you talk about, once we're separated from the umbilical cord, all we do as humans is seek connection again. And then on the other hand, we know who we are when we're alone, when we have that sacred time. And so as humans, it seems like we're always in that dilemma of I need to be alone and I need to be connected.
Ooh, I love that. That's a great way to frame it. Yeah, I mean, I think as cultural Jews, in my film, The Tribe, that I wrote with my husband Ken about the Barbie doll as it relates to American Jewish identity. And it's funny, you're mentioning a couple of my Jewish films, but I've made, out of like 30-something films, I've only really made 4 Jewish films, but it's interesting to think of them together because there's a thread.
Right.
But I remember when I was making that film, and this friend of mine was teaching me that the word Israel means to wrestle. Now, it actually means to wrestle with God, but again, I just told you I don't like to relate things to religion.
Okay.
Like,
Well, just wrestle is fine.
Just wrestle,
just
yeah.
wrestle.
And in the script, I say it makes so much sense to me that Israel means to wrestle, because the Jewish existence is wrestling. And what you just said about the human wrestling, really, with needing to connect, and yet knowing we also need to connect with ourselves and make space for that, and really have the courage to make space for it, because our modern world wants us to never be alone. It wants us to constantly need to be on the phone, on the screen, on the feed, on the whatever. And so there's this existential wrestling with a sense of self and what the world wants to constantly inundate you with, and what they want you to want and be and read and stress about. And how do you take that back? And that's the way I feel like one day a week. I feel like I really recalibrate that relationship. Like all week I'm kind of like, and having fun. Like it's not like I don't like being on the online world. I love it. I mean, I'm like playing it on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm reading the news and creating little things, and then to help me create my bigger thing. But I am so ready to turn it off on Friday. I'm just like, like I just feel like I exhale in such a deep way, and then I feel like, oh gosh, I get to just be with the actual people that are in my house and with myself, which, and my own thoughts, which I find I'm more excited about where they take me when I'm not being interrupted so much. I can think in longer stretches and longer vistas on perspective.
Interesting. So that space, that temple in time, creates a temple in space. We start with time. And
oh my God!
Creates a different view of space, right? I'm getting this from you. You're saying it. I'm just reinterpreting it.
No, that's a beautiful insight. Like, okay, let's say it again. So we're creating a temple in time. Be able to think in space. I love that.
Because you said it opens up these vistas, right? So it's
But
then I look at space differently. Wow,
that is so beautiful. I have to wait. Just wait 1 second because I gotta. Temple in time to think in space. Okay, cool.
Okay, so
I have to say, that's a beautiful quality as an interviewer, because you've done that twice now, where you have pulled these beautiful threads and openings. I love that. That's really great. Doesn't happen very often, I have to say.
Thank you. So I want to follow, actually I want to take a break, and if you're just joining me, this is the Dr. Lisa Show on KUHS Denver. My amazing guest, Tiffany Shlain. You can find, Tiffany, what's your website? Is it tiffanyschlain.com?
Yeah, and there's no C in my last name, so just SHLAIN.
Okay.
Yeah,
Tiffany. And you missed the first half hour, the first part, and so you'll have to pick it up on my YouTube or my website, elisarobin.com. But thank you for joining us at this moment. Let me get back to what I was thinking about. Some of the things that you share, which are very personal, you share some things about your dad, and this is maybe going to be a silly question, but your dad said that if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And I wonder, I don't even know if you can connect these things, but reading your stories about the red lipstick and the hat, I wonder if those were ways at a younger age that you started living on the edge by expressing yourself differently.
No, great observation. Yeah, I think it is, because when you're a blonde, blue-eyed Jew named Tiffany, or just even a blonde, blue-eyed person named Tiffany, because most people don't think I'm Jewish because my last name doesn't have a C in it. I would was always kind of like, people would just assume I was like a blonde, blue-eyed American. And there's a lot of assumptions around blondes. I think by wearing the hat and putting on my lipstick, it puts me a little bit on the edge. But I thought, as you were talking, I was thinking, I do feel like I've always kind of been on the edge of something. In the early days, it was the technology, because that was very edgy then.
Right.
And edgy, literally, like, it was just the edge of us that were using it. And now I'm on this other edge where I'm saying, don't use it all the time. And so, like, that's become counterculture. It used to be in the 60s, countercultures was like taking drugs and like looking at the edge through psychedelics, and now I'm like, look at the edge by turning all the shit off occasionally, because it's like, it's infiltrating your brain, it's reshaping your brain. And you know, a lot of my work, I delve into a lot of neuroscience. My mother had a PhD, has her PhD in psychology, and taught me a lot about psychology with the brain. And my father was a surgeon, operated on the brain, and wrote many books about the brain. So I'm super interested in topics around that. And I just want to tell all your listeners that anything you do is reshaping your brain. Listening to the show, reading a book, but basically who you follow reshapes your brain. It remakes connections in your brain. So think about yourself as you are the curator of your brain. What are you letting in all the time? Because that's shaping it. And you need to be more intentional with what you let in and when you let your own mind in. Because when you let your own mind into your own brain, it's got so much to process already. And we never give it time. That's when the magic happens with your brain, is when you give time to process and absorb everything you've experienced that week or in your life. If you never give yourself that vista of space and time, you're never going to have that magical space of your thoughts where you're really weaving together all of those experiences into new ideas, which is what creativity is about.
That's sort of this profound message for right now, when everyone seems to be joining a group or a tribe or a belief system or a way of being. And yet, if we don't step back, I don't necessarily know if that set of ethics or morals or values are actually me.
Right.
They're what I'm encoding because I'm hearing it. But is it me? And that is, again, this sort of dance between the individual and the community.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a different kind of wrestling, because there's the wrestling of connection and individuality, and then individuality and community, and individuality and like politics, and what does it mean to be a part of this country and this moment in time. And I think that these are all really important things to think about. And you know, some people, I think there's a lot of fear in turning off stuff, because then you'll actually have to be with yourself. And I know that can seem scary, but I promise once you get past that, when you really create this space to, and be a little directive too, because your mind naturally on its own will go to the negative.
Yes.
Naturally, it will be negative. It'll critique you in your brain. It'll be negative. It'll worry. But if you create space to redirect, like I have a practice where I write what I'm grateful for. I know that word grateful sounds so cheesy sometimes, but I do, and it redirects my morning. And before I go to bed, it redirects my sleep. And that you have amazing power to, shape your mind too. Yeah, that's what it is that the world has immense power in shaping you. And I think people have just given up control to that by being on the screens all the time. But that you have an immense amount of power to shape yourself into your greatest potential if you create the space to focus on that. And the way most of us are living now, there's no space for that. And think of yourself as like, you can help reshape in the best way your thoughts. Because if you let the news and all the stress of that, it's just going to strengthen the parts of your brain that are about fear and worry and less than, and I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that, I don't have this, I can't buy this, I need to buy this, your most primal sense of wanting. And when you step back from that and you appreciate what you already have and think about what you really want, not what companies want you to think what you want, it's probably much simpler, and maybe it's bolder and grander, but you need the space to plan to make that happen.
It's interesting, isn't it, that what we're often told is if you want to be your best self or whatever, that fill your time with all these activities. And the edge of that, where you're out on the edge now, right, is saying one of those activities should be silence, should be time alone, should be peace and reflection. And yes, things that maybe sound cheesy, but I do the same thing. Actually, I go to bed with thank you for this day and sort of a reflection, and I start my morning with thank you for this day, and right, again, more reflection. And that the turning off, which I usually do from Shabbat dinner, Friday night, until, sundown, whenever, which is a little early still this year, because we're still in this kind of dark time of the year, that's when I can write my blogs. That's when I can think about my next novel. That's when I can read somebody's book and think I really want to talk to this person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And reading is different. Reading, and you know this because of your studies of the brain, reading, especially because we pause as we ingest those words, is very different than things we get via the screen into our eyes.
It's so different. It's so, I find like, somebody even sends me an interesting article during the week. I print it out and save it for Saturday to read on paper.
Yes.
And there's so many studies that show that your brain does a different type of reading.
Yes.
And also, I just think I read more deeply. I mean, there's this writer from London who was talking about how we're reading more than ever, but we're skim reading.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that I read in the morning. I've tried to institute this new ritual where after I write in my journal, that I'll read a little, like for like a half an hour of something that I really, my brain is more supple in the morning before the whole world's come in.
Yeah, that's sort of this, again, loveliness about also visioning. So it's not space and it's not time. There's a place in between those where our brain absorbs and expands, right? Because reading, right? And I know your dad talked about reading in one of his books about changing our brain. And yet, I'll take that change. I'll take the reading over the computer for what it does to my brain. But there's something that happens on reading and reflecting, and then I always have one of these when I'm reading, because that's why there's white spaces on that page, right? So you can write on them and make notes.
Yeah.
Right? So let me dig. I got a couple things that just occurred to me while you were talking, and this one will sound off topic, but hopefully not too far. You were talking about the word Israel, which is to wrestle. There's another Hebrew word that reminds me of you, and it is actually the word Ivrit, which is Hebrew in Hebrew. And Ivrit is to cross over. So, like to cross a bridge, not build a bridge, but to cross over. And I have to say that you help people, you help me sort of with my struggle that I do on some Shabbats of totally turning off. But I see you as an Ivrit, as a crossing over. Here's where technology is wonderful, and here, as you stand in the middle of those two, crossing over, is where it can overtake you. Right? So there's
I love that. Actually, I've heard that word before in Temple, but I don't think I've really thought about it, but it made me think of the word metaphor, which is about bridge.
Yes.
A bridge. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful, I think that's right. I mean, my next book is going to be all about creativity and making things happen, and kind of after so many years of doing different kinds of projects, whether it be words or films or a book, like I definitely have a process that I go through that I think can help others. But a bridge, an opening to walk through. And I do like inspiring people. When you said that at the start, I I get such pleasure out of creating a canvas or making people believe that they can do more than they think they can do. Because I know they can. And I think that really came from my parents, believing I could do anything. And I know that's rare. And I know a lot of people don't have that. And I hope to try to instill that in them. I mean, even the Webby Awards, in so many ways, was a really grand way of saying, good job, that is superb work, we're giving you an award. And I know that so many people up on that stage, and it meant so much to them, that maybe their parents had never said,
Good job.
Good job. That's all it was, good job.
Right.
And this is the standard of excellence now for everyone. And then that next group, go higher. Mm-hmm. Go higher. Go higher. And I think that that's an example. I mean, even with Connected, I really did have an incredible father that I lost, but I felt so lucky that I got that many years with him, almost 40 years. And I remember really being intentional to not make anyone feel bad that didn't have a good father. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make sure that it was inviting and not, and I remember this man came up to me at the theater, like tears in his eyes at the end. He's like, I have 2 young daughters and you showed me what it looks like to be a good father. And it was just so beautiful. And even with 24/6, you know, a lot of people read my book. And I would say half or less start actually doing texture bots every week. But all of them will usually reach out to me in some way over Instagram or Twitter and email and say, I changed the way I think about it. I think twice before I pick up the phone instead of taking a moment, and that makes me so happy that it can just shift you. You know, that Buckminster Fuller used to talk about on the spaceships, there's a trim tab at the end, and it would slightly change the direction of the ship. And I like thinking that I can be kind of a trim tab about the way you think about technology. It doesn't have to consume you.
I love that. One of the first books I wrote was with a girlfriend who was my supervisor at the time, and when I was an academic dean. And it was about being a pirate. And one of the things I said in this book, I'll have to send you a copy just for the fun of it.
I would love to.
Okay, I will do this.
Talking with my older daughter about pirates.
Oh, I'll send it to you. It'll be funny. But one of the things I talk about in there is that we all want to be on the grand ship in the center of the armada. But if you want to change the direction of the ship, you need to be the pirate ship at the edge. Yeah. That's how you can shift the entire armada. And that's really what you're talking about. When you're saying live on the edge, you're not talking about climbing mountains and doing things that scare, right? You're talking about emotionally and intellectually being on that edge and watching how that changes the thinking of people around you, and then how it ripples out, which I know is a name of...
My film studio. Yeah, let it ripple.
Yeah,
yes,
ripple.
Exactly.
Right. That's what you're doing. You're saying that if I present these notions from the edge, it will ripple out and the world will change, and I don't have to be the one in the center making the change.
Yes, and I love that. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's being at the edge so you have the perspective that you don't have when you're in the middle of it and when you're online all the time. Mm-hmm. You lose perspective.
You lose perspective, right? Because when you're at the edge,
and you have to unplug it. You have to unplug from it to get perspective on it.
Yes.
Or be at the edge.
Yes.
Yeah. Which today unplugging is being at the edge, because people can't even believe I do it.
I know.
How can you do that? They don't even understand it. Right. You don't understand it.
I love it. I love it. Though I have friends who I still will use my cell phone because I don't have a landline, but I just talk. Talk. I'm willing to talk to people. I'm not going to Zoom. I don't check social media. I don't post on social media. I don't, and I don't even take pictures. Because I want to be in the moment. So if I'm out hiking, I don't want to take pictures. I want to be and it's hard for me to be present, and that's what this kind of
practice
Shabbat
is about. Yeah,
helps me do that.
it's strengthening that muscle again that we've lost.
So there are so many questions I could ask you, but I want to shift us a little, and I hope this is okay, because and let me set it up for you by saying I want to ask you a little bit about the synchronicity of sharing your stories and where that has led. So let me set it up for you. And I don't know if I got this from your film or your book or wherever, but it hit me actually last night when I was getting ready again for this interview. You talk about this relationship with your dad who died right before your youngest daughter was born. My dad died 2 days before my wedding. You talk about, your dad said something like, I have had an epiphany, and then he lost his voice and he couldn't talk. While my dad was dying, and he had power of voice, he lost his voice. One of the last things you heard your dad say via the film, which was brilliant, that you created for him to be shown at his funeral so he could be at his funeral, was, I will always be with you. I may have gotten the words wrong, but basically that.
No, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing I remember my dad saying, because I was trying to rush this wedding because he was ill, was I said to him, do you want to give me away? And he said, I'll never give you away. I'm keeping you forever.
Aww.
So I'm watching your film. I think it was on Connection that I finally got this, because I was rewatching the end of that. And I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to in my head, and I'm just wondering, as this sort of connector, have you found people sharing that synchronicity of the way your stories reach for people? And is that something you can plan in a film or in a book?
No, I mean, I think that goes back to when you just speak your ultimate truth and specifics on what happened, you're going to reach other people. And a lot of people have shared with me losing a parent they were close to. And, you only know what that feels like when it happens. And the kind of things that you're saying, which are very specific and beautiful and aligned with what I experience. And I don't know if you feel that way, but I do really feel like my dad's with me all the time. Like,
Absolutely.
100%. He's just here right now.
I know. Are you wearing something of his right now? I'm just curious. Or have something in your
one time I was wearing his watch, which is always 4 p.m. because it's broken.
Okay.
That was kind of symbolic too.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, because I always have either my dad's ring on or one of his bracelets on. So how has that helped you evolve your notion of relationships, fathers and daughters, maybe mothers and daughters? That experience.
Well, I think he was a very present person, and I think the tech Shabbats are, my older daughter's just about to go off to college, and the younger one's 11, and certainly the pandemic has, we've been home a lot together, but still, even with that, the Shabbats are still this very special day with us connecting, because the other days, there's so much going on. So I do think he taught me the value of nothing's more important than family. And those kind of relationships, and you have to nurture them, and that's really important to me too. So
you've said, here and things I've read that you've said, right? I think he said things to you like, be present, live life to the fullest. Easy to say, right? Those things are so easy to say. Be present. I can vouch for how hard that is for me. I'm wondering, so one of the ways you embody this in your life is the tech Shabbat.
Yeah.
Right? What else? Just talk to me, give me some insight maybe into how that's affected your creative process.
I'll tell you, my dad and I, the other thing that we really shared is we both gave a lot of talks in theaters normally, and conversations like this, because he was interviewed for his book, and I think actually these interviews are such a gift, because for an hour we get to talk. There's nothing more important. There's nothing else we're thinking about, and that's really rare in a conversation, that you can, if you're taking a walk with a friend, but a lot of times I'm talking to someone at my house while I'm cooking dinner and the kids need me and I'm trying to focus, and it's just a gift. And I think being on stage, giving a talk and presenting ideas, you have to be incredibly present. Like, I think about all the things that you really need to be present for. Shabbat, making love,
That was
giving
the
a
second one that
talk.
came to mind for me, yes.
Think about the things that really demand you to be
Yes,
present.
absolutely.
Right? I mean, there's a lot of things you can just half be there for. And then all these technologies are kind of built to make you half there.
Good point.
And you're on a walk, you want to take a picture of the walk. You're with someone and you're checking your phone, or it's buzzing, or, you know, they're designed to make you not present. So it's been an interesting exercise for all your listeners and for us when we hang up. Like,
yes.
What are all the things you have to be completely present for?
Right.
Really show up for with your whole self. Like, even when Biden was like, I have my whole soul in this.
Yes.
That's so powerful. He was quoting, who was he quoting? He was quoting someone else.
Abraham Lincoln.
That.
Abraham Lincoln.
It was
right.
Abraham Lincoln.
Right, who was signing the Emancipation Proclamation and said, my whole soul is in this. And I was watching him speak right then. Biden, obviously, not Lincoln. And
my whole soul. Like, when is your whole soul
in something?
In something.
Is that a creative process for you? Is that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I have to be passionate about a subject to do anything, because they take so much out of me. So I know that enough now. And I have to be really interested. Like, I've never made a film for someone else. You know, I've been asked, but I'm like, oh no, I couldn't do that. I don't even know how to do that, because I only can do things that, like, I can't stop thinking about myself. I mean, unless it's like for reproductive choice or something for Planned Parenthood, but I just like to create what I create. I have to be so committed. My whole soul needs to be in it. I need to be so interested in it. And I feel blessed that I've been able to do projects that captivate me in that way. But the creative process I'm super interested in. Like, right now, I'm working on an original series, like a documentary series on my book about technology and society. And I have that happening, but this other book idea about creativity, I'm just like, a couple mornings this last week, I had ideas and I just had to go to it. And I feel like it's calling me, even though I'm trying to stay focused here, but it's like calling me to, you know, it's interesting when I feel really inspired to work on something. I love that feeling the best. And I don't know where the writing's going to take me. I'm sure you feel that way too when you write.
You know, I as I said, and this isn't about me, but I wrote my second novel during the summer of the pandemic, and I started it, and the first chapter was the worst because I thought I knew what I was doing, and then I invented these characters, and they went off and did stuff. I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? And they're like, just be quiet and write this down. This is how the book goes. And one of my dear friends is Joanne Greenberg, who, under a pen name, wrote Never Promised You a Rose Garden years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And she's amazing. And I said this to her, and she still is a prolific writer. And she said, "Oh, then you're doing it right." She goes, "I've had characters in my book threaten to sue me because I didn't follow what they wanted me to do." That's I haven't gotten there yet. Where my characters.
That's interesting, because that's the fiction. Like, I love when my writing just like goes in such a random direction that I woke up to write this and then I wrote that, and I'm like, wow, that was exciting. That
I know.
Was like,
where did that come from? Yeah.
Pulled me in a totally different direction. Yeah.
Right. And I think, and you know, we keep coming back to this, that notion of like a temple in time, right? Mm-hmm. Allows us to re-envision space and re-envision our words, and suddenly what comes out of us is not what we've been repeating. So we get out of the repetition, right? So what you were talking about, how we can do things sort of half aware. Too many people drive that way. I learned to drive on LA freeways and LA canyons, so I understand that. And yet, that's when we're just repeating things we've heard. When we create that temple in time, different things come out of my mouth. And I might suddenly realize I don't think those things that I said before.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I was just reading recently about psilocybin and why does it work to take people out of depression or PTSD, which is a lot of the research that's been done. And this thing I read last weekend, I just can't stop thinking about, because I made a film about something called the default mode network, which is a neuroscience term of your brain state when you're daydreaming. When you aren't doing directed thinking, when you're spacing out or daydreaming, your mind starts making unusual connections from things you did, someone said something, but it takes this crazy path that makes this unique new connection. And I love that idea so much. But when I read the article about psilocybin, it said the reason it can take you out of depression and PTSD is it takes you out of this negative pattern, because the default mode network is sometimes called the me network, because it's always ideas in relation to you, in relation to something you did in your past, something you're going to do. It's all relation to who you are. But what psilocybin does is it actually turns off the default mode network, so your sense of self goes away, and you suddenly are not trapped in these waves of thinking patterns. In fact, you're not even trapped with any thoughts connecting to yourself. So suddenly you feel a sense of oneness that helps you have perspective and lets you out of this kind of ruts of thinking, or that depression lead to, or PTSD lead to. But I've just been so fascinated with that. Like, it turns off your default mode network. I think that's fascinating.
I think that's fascinating. I think you, again, in that moment when you talked about being cut off at the umbilical cord and then our brain searching for meaning, you're taking us back out of our brain, right? Me and how do I develop, into a sense of presence. And maybe it's that sense of presence then, so that takes us out of the PTSD.
And takes you out of, like, it allows you to get to that vista.
Yes, to that vista.
Of consciousness and oneness and like connection with something much larger than your individual worries or life, and that's incredibly liberating for people that are trapped in a depressive rut or PTSD. I mean, it's really interesting.
That is fascinating. So listen, we have about 3 minutes left, which, you know, I can't believe it. I'm like, wait, didn't we just get on? But I want to know what still inspires you? What still ignites your passion? And you've touched on it, and actually, let me rephrase that. How do you keep your moxie alive? Because you talked about moxie in a wonderful way, just that courage to do things. How do you keep that alive? I want to ask you that instead.
That's a great question, because I used to really, like, traveling was very inspiring to me. I always came up with so many ideas traveling.
Right.
But I do feel like these Saturdays, these tech Shabbats, I get a lot of, it takes courage to do it. And then when you're in this space, you just are reminded every week how amazing it is. And I do feel like, I mean, I know I come up with all of my good ideas on Saturday. They always come that day. So again, it's about creating space to even have enough time to think of the thing you have the moxie to do. You know, it comes back to Tech Shabbat, which is why I ended up writing that book. I'm like, it's the secret to everything. It makes you sleep better, makes you laugh more, your relationships better, more creative, gives you moxie. It's like, there's so many things I could go on and on about. After 11 years, all the things I've learned from just taking one day off each week. It's such a simple, ancient, free idea.
So that is a wonderful place to end. We have like 1 minute, and so what I want to do is remind people that they can find you at tiffanyschlein.com. They can go to, is it Let It Ripple? Is that the film?
LetItRipple.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
tiffanyschlein.com has like everything, all my films, my book.
Oh my God, it has all the links.
And then, yeah, Let It Ripple is my film studio, and you can see just my films specifically.
Right.
And
the book 24/6 is everywhere. Anywhere you might buy a book, you can find 24/6, right? So
yeah.
So if you're listening, thank you, because we're at the end, which is sad because this has been such a wonderful conversation. But I want to thank everyone for joining, and I want you to each let's Tiff and I are going to set this challenge for you. take a few minutes after this show of quiet. What ignited inside of you? What inspired you? Grab a pen, make a note or two. Maybe go for a walk and just think about that. Contemplate. Just think about a temple in time. Just a temple in time. And what does that mean to you? So, Tiffany, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody listening.
Oh, I love this conversation with you. I was going to add, can I add one thing?
Absolutely, go for it.
Not only thinking about the temple in time, but I'd love for you to write down, when do you feel most present? Which you could also change to, when do you feel most alive?
Absolutely.
In that multilingual way. And it's a really great thing to think about. When do you feel most alive? When do you feel most present? And in the moment. When you're in the flow.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for joining me on the Dr. Lisa Show on KUHS Denver, the stream. Please join me. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another amazing guest. And until then, do stay well. But most importantly, stay inspired. Talk to you soon. Bye. Okay, I got the technology right. Thank you. That was amazing.
So much fun. I really can't wait to re-listen to. You came up. You're great.